Okay, let's look at multiplying fractions together now. Multiplying fractions together is a very simple process, and it's a process that if most people were to guess what they had to do when they were multiplying out a fraction, if they didn't really know what they were doing, they would probably guess right. So it's very, very straightforward, and it's what your natural sort of reaction to what technique you would use, that's what you do. What your gut tells you is what you actually do. When you're multiplying out fractions, all you have to do is very simple. 1 times 1 is like so on the top, and on the bottom 2 times 3. And that is all you need to do to multiply out a fraction. Okay? So on the top, 1 times 1 is 1 and 2 times 3 is 6. Very straightforward. Okay, really, really simple technique, and that's what you would have tried to do, I suspect, most people, if you never watched this video. Okay, so number 2, if you had 2/3 times by 5/7, for example, and you've got to work that out. Okay, 2 times 5, I'm going to go straight to the answer, is 10. And on the bottom line, 3 times 7, the answer is 21. There you go, the answer is 10/21, so 10 over 21. And that's it, it's really that easy. I'm going to show you a little technique here that you may or may not be aware of, and it is very, very useful in certain types of question to be able to do this technique. Let me practice one more like this first. 7/8 times 3/4. Okay, and once we've done one more, then I'll show you this little technique that is very useful to make your life a bit easier in harder questions. Here we go. 7 times 3 is 21, and 8 times 4 is 32, and that's the answer, 21 over 32. Okay, what happens when we come on to a question like this then? Sometimes you might get something like 1/2 times 2/3. Now, if you were going to do that, there's 2 ways you could get to the answer, and both ways for this particular question are quite straightforward. So it's take your pick. You could do this. 1 times 2 is 2. 2 times 3 is 6. So you get the answer 2/6. But as ever, with all fractions, when you're presenting your answer to the examiner, you need to show it in its simplest format, which means that if a fraction can cancel, you should cancel it down. So for 2/6, what you should spot is that 2 will divide into both 2 and 6. So I'm going to share the top and I'm going to share the bottom by 2. Share the top by 2, you get 1. Share the bottom by 2, you get 3. So 2/6 is actually the same as 1/3. They mean the same thing, but 1/3 is the best way to show that fraction, 1/3. So the answer is 1/3. Nothing wrong with doing that at all. However, there's an alternative way of getting to the answer 1/3, which you should be aware of, because it can help you in harder questions when doing what I've done there proves to be quite difficult. Let me show you again. I won't put number 5, I'll just do the same sum again. 1/2 times 2/3 equals. This is a little technique that only works, and I want you to etch this into your mind, it only works for multiplication of fractions. It doesn't work for addition of fractions, subtraction of fractions. It only works for multiplication of fractions. When you're multiplying 2 fractions, if you see that one of the top numbers and one of the bottom numbers can cancel, then you are allowed to cancel in the sum itself. How do I mean? So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to share that top number by 2 and cross it down, put a 1. I'm going to share the bottom number here by 2 and cross it out and put a 1. So in a multiplication sum of fractions, any number on the top of any fraction can cancel with any number on the bottom of any fraction. And so I've cancelled those 2 there. If you were doing an addition sum like 1/2 plus 2/3, you would not be able to, it would not be permissible to do that cancelling there. That is not allowed. It doesn't work. So, I mean, I could perhaps do another video explaining why it doesn't work. It just does not work, and you should never ever do that. The way that you add up fractions is to use LCM, get both bottom numbers to be the same, and then add them up. So in that case you get both of them to be 6s. Okay, treble that, double that, double that. So you do not cancel in that situation, but here you're allowed to cancel. It does work because now you've got 1 times 1 on the top, which is 1, and 1 times 3 on the bottom, which is 3. You get 1/3. You get the same answer. In the line above, the cancelling took place right at the end. In this method, the cancelling took place in the sum. Now I imagine that many of you, perhaps if you're not familiar with this technique, would prefer to do it the top method. And that's fine. If you get easy examples, the top method is perfectly fine to do that. All I'm saying to you is in certain hard examples, by doing it the bottom way, it makes it a lot easier to work out. And you need to be aware of that. Okay? So let's have a look at number 5 and I'll show you a way of doing number 5. And we're going to do it by both ways again. Let's say I had 4 over 9 multiplied by 3 over 8, like so. If I was going to do it the way that most people first start learning how to do multiplication of fractions, this is what you'd do. You'd say 4 times 3 is 12, and then you've got to do 9 eighths. Well, hopefully you do know your 9 times or your 8 times table. 9 eighths is 72. You get to there. But you shouldn't leave it like that because that is not in its simplest format. Now you've got to cancel that down, and this is where some people find the problems start. You should know that your 12 times table. So if you know your 12 times table, 12 will actually go into both of those. If you don't know your 12 times table very well, then you might start dividing top and bottom by 2. And then start, or possibly start dividing by 4. Or dividing by, you might try dividing by 3 for example. All of those numbers will work, okay, but the best one to pick would be 12. So share by 12, it goes once, share that by 12, it goes 6. Now I can see some of you might say, well, I wouldn't have spotted that. Well, if you had a calculator, fine, no problem. You don't need to do this with the cancelling technique. Obviously you just punch buttons on your calculator and it does it for you. 4 fraction button 9 times 3 fraction button 8. But we're now dealing with questions for paper 1, no calculator. So you need to cancel it, and sharing by 12 is the way to go. Some of you might have said, well, I could have shared by 2. I could have done that, share by 2 and share by 2. You get to there. But you see it cancels again. Some of you might then be able to see that you can share by 6, goes once, and share that by 6, you get 6. So you end up with the 6th, but you've done it in 2 steps. Share by 2 and then share by 6. It's the same as sharing by 12 in 1 step. Let me get rid of that. So however you do it, if you're doing it that way, you end up with 1/6. Let me show you a way that somebody who's more confident with fractions would deal with this. Let's do it again. 4/9 times 3/8. And what we do is we look for cancelling that can take place in the sum. For example, I can see that 3 can share by 3 to go once, and I can see a number on the bottom. It's got to be on the bottom. It's either that number there or that number there. It doesn't matter which, but it's got to be on the bottom. Share that by 3 on the top, share that number on the bottom by 3, it goes 3 times. So I've done that cancelling. But I haven't finished, because I can see that the 4 and the 8 can also cancel with each other. I can share the 4 by 4 to go once, and I can share the 8 by 4 to go twice. Notice how I've done that. The first 2 I cancelled, the 3 and the 9, I cancelled with lines going that way, and the 4 and the 8 I've cancelled with lines going that way. It just makes it a bit easier to follow what's going on. So shared the 4 by 4, 1, shared the 8 by 4 goes twice. And so now what I've got to do is just simply tidy up by multiplying out what's left. 1 times 1 is 1, 3 times 2 is 6. And surprise, surprise, you get the same answer, 1/6. So why do it this way? Because when you're trying to cancel 12 over 72, it's not easy always to spot what is the best thing to cancel. But here, when the numbers are much smaller in the sum, it's much easier to spot the things that can cancel. And so it's usually easier to cancel in the sum, if you know what you're doing. Let's try another one. Number 6. How about doing 5/6 times 18 over 25. Now, if you're doing this one on paper 1, and you don't do it by cancelling in the sum, it's not very nice, because look what is going to happen. You're going to have to work out what 5 times 18 is. Now, you might be able to do that in your head, I hope you can. If you can't, then you don't have to do a side sum. But however you do it, you've got to work it out. If I was doing 5 times 18, well, I'd say 18 times 10, 18 times 10 is 180, so 18 times 5 is half of that. Half of that, so half of 180 is 90. And then you've got to divide by, or over, and then 6 times 25. Well, you've got to work that out either in your head or as a side sum. 25 times 6, 150. So you get to there. Now, that wasn't very nice, to be honest, either in your head or a side sum. The figures started getting quite big then, as you can see. But now you've got to cancel it. Well, okay, they both end in naught, so at least I can share by 10. You get 9 over 15. But you still haven't finished, because they can still share again by 3. So share that by 3, it goes 3 times. Share that by 3, it goes 5 times. There you go. There's the final answer, 3/5. And I think you'll agree that it wasn't very nice. And if you're not very good at mental maths, you probably would have had to do some side calculations. Not nice. They could get a lot harder than that. So why don't you do this instead? Let's do the sum again. 5/6 times 18 over 25. And let's try cancelling in the sum. I can see that I can share the 5 on the top with 25 on the bottom. 5 goes into both of them. Share that by 5, it goes once. Share that by 5, it goes 5 times. So I've cancelled there. But there's more. You can see that the 6 and the 18 will also cancel, because 6 goes into both. Always pick the biggest number, like 2 would go into both. But pick the biggest. 6 goes into both. So that's what I'm going to share. So I'm going to share that by 6, goes once. Share that by 6, it goes 3 times. Like so. And that's it. Just check. Do the 3 and the 5 cancel? No, they don't. So that's it. Nothing else will cancel. So what I'm left with is 1 times 3 on the top is 3, and 1 times 5 on the bottom is 5. And hey presto, it's the same answer. And it takes out all the need for doing big calculations by doing it in that fashion. Okay, that's the end of this video.